On a quiet street in front of the Mary shop, the drug display cases barely flickered in the semi-darkness, and inside the owner regretfully explained to the customer that the potent potions had run out. The old merchant gently told Shin there was no need to hide and invited him to come back again as he slowly walked down the street. The young man thought to himself that revealing his face would only complicate his own work. Then the elderly merchant noted that his potions were of better quality and more profitable than those from the alchemist's guild, and one of the passers-by decided to buy the potion, noting that every adventurer was looking for just such a potion. The young man asked the old woman with interest how she managed to brew such unusual mixtures, sincerely expressing curiosity. She calmly replied that it was her trade secret, while an irritated voice came from the side demanding an explanation. Finn angrily attacked another boy about ketchup stains on his clothes, demanding to know how he was going to fix the mess, while the other boy apologized lamely. He quietly thought about what he had said, and then she asked what it meant, and an elderly man nearby explained that the boy had gotten a job at the shop across the street yesterday and asked if anything had happened. Meanwhile, the dark-haired guy refused to intervene, but he was persistently persuaded to help the victim. The red-haired adventurer swung his sword angrily, while the other, kneeling, swore to pay for the cleaning of his clothes to make amends. The man in the apron held the young man tightly by the wrist, warning him of punishment, while the latter, in panic, shouted out who he was. After this, one man sharply kicked another, apologizing, and the motley crowd watched in silence while he puzzledly tried to make sense of the situation. Soon, one of the passers-by recognized the dark-haired man and joyfully pointed at him, and he awkwardly explained that he had lost his usual hat. The young man bowed low, expressing his sincere gratitude, and the scene moved to a noisy market square with lanterns and a lively crowd. The dark-haired boy quietly remarked that he would like some peace, but the two big men only laughed and teased him for his usual sternness, while the young waiter listened from the side. The red-haired youth sheepishly admitted that he had only just begun his journey as an adventurer, which surprised the bald man, while the dark-haired one watched in silence. Then the young man explained that he had been saving up for a powerful potion, but realized that it was more difficult than he thought, and two people nearby noticed his persistence and praised such a desire, despite his youth. The boy dreamed of one day becoming a great hero, like the legendary warrior who single-handedly slew the dragon of disaster, Fritra. At the tavern, a man asked Shin if he was an adventurer, and he indifferently answered in the affirmative, while another sharply retorted that Shin was not an adventurer at all, which stunned the red-haired listener. And the young man with dark hair calmly revealed that he was reborn, and said this while holding a cup in his hands. The young man spoke the word about rebirth out loud with surprise, looking at it with curiosity and asking questions about what was said. The man then wished the guy good luck and poured him a free drink, but he began to think that he might be late and it was time for him to get back to work. The young man calmly explained that he was just a pharmacist and wasn't interested in such conversations, but the older man questioned why he was even asking, and the other guy walked away puzzled. After this, the bearded merchant told the dark-haired youth about the counterfeit potions that were flooding the city, which caught him off guard. Bearded added that a group of scammers was actively selling counterfeits and danger lurked everywhere, but Shin indifferently remarked that this did not concern him. Meanwhile, the young man was reluctantly washing the dishes when he was hurried, and then he heard a loud noise from the street, which immediately attracted his attention. Someone in the crowd was loudly explaining that potions were an essential part of any adventurer's journey, and people listened with curiosity and confusion. The man in the hat confidently declared that his potions were superior to the guild's, and right in front of everyone, he injected himself with an injection, steam pouring out of the punctured skin. The man in glasses announced a special service for adventurers worth 3 large silver coins, and the amazed boy noticed that his wounds had completely healed. One confidently asserted that the product was genuine, another was doubtful and asked about the counterfeit, and the third drew attention to the excessively high price of 3 silver coins. The seller explained that his hat was made from S-rank dragon skin and was marked with a symbol confirming his status as a top-tier apothecary. The crowd immediately began to buzz with demands for elixirs, one young man shouting that he wanted 20, and another asking for 100, while the merchant thanked them for their purchases. The young man enthusiastically reached out to buy something, but was stopped in time, while a third man watched from the side with concern. Meanwhile, the ardent adventurer, catching his breath, remembered the quest to hunt a D-rank stone wolf and rushed along the forest path. Suddenly he came face to face with a roaring dragon, but the beast sank its teeth into him, causing him to scream in pain and retreat. Finn barely held on as the huge wolf-like creature came down on him, fighting back furiously with his sword. Then, in despair, he drank the potion, convincing himself that everything would be fine, and tried to collect his thoughts in front of the prickly monster in the thicket. Suddenly, the red-haired warrior fell to the ground, trying to get up and not understanding what was happening to him, while the creature nearby watched with interest. Finn, breathing heavily, met the gaze of the snarling beast, baring sharp teeth, and it growled low, forcing him to cower in fear. At this time, a pouring rain was pouring down on the deserted market, and the man and his young companion were discussing the lack of customers when suddenly footsteps were heard in the distance, approaching through the downpour. The man hastily demanded boiled water and clean instruments to help the wounded boy, while the other watched with alarm, fearing that delay would be fatal. After this, the young man confidently declared that he would prepare the medicine right there, laying out the necessary ingredients on the table. Meanwhile, one man encouraged the wounded Finn to hold on, while those standing nearby whispered about what was happening and urged him to remain silent. Then he assured that Shin would definitely overcome the illness, and with a determined look, he announced the completion of the preparations. Kai carefully asked the wounded Finn to drink slowly and take his time, while the others watched the process tensely. Soon the crowd watched in amazement as the young man's body, covered in bruises and abrasions, was rapidly restored under the influence of the soft glow. Sweat was streaming down the rescuer's face, but with relief he announced that the victim was fine and should now rest, and the others hastened to offer help in carrying him inside. At this moment, the old man handed Shin a bottle, explaining that it contained a sample of the counterfeit potion, and caused him genuine surprise. Someone carefully held the unconscious boy, wrapped in cloth, explaining that it was this remedy that had brought him to his current state. A young man asked his uncle about the lair of a group selling counterfeit goods, and he replied that he could use the connections of his friends from the stables, noting that this had not been mentioned before. Meanwhile, in the busy harbor, near the stone bridge, a ship was moored, and nearby the sound of coins could be heard as someone counted them out loud. Two men shouted joyfully over a huge pile of silver on the table, celebrating their large earnings and incredible luck, while others watched from the side. Then one smugly revealed the secret that only the first potion turned out to be real, and the two nearby sarcastically discussed the naivety of the adventurers. The company was amazed at the unexpected value of the randomly chosen hat, with one fearing the revenge of the customers and the other praising the foresight of their leader. The sinister figure revealed that the supposed healing elixirs were in fact paralyzing, which is why none of their victims would ever return. After this, the whole group raised their mugs in unison, and one suggested visiting neighboring cities to find new victims after the celebration. The red-haired adventurer approached the two-seated interlocutors, interested in their conversation, while someone's shadow silently watched from the darkness. Then the confident young man asked to join their company, but two of them indignantly jumped up, demanding to know what he had done with the unconscious guards. The dark-haired participant reacted with surprise, and the determined young man confirmed that he was the leader. The young man insisted that he posed no danger, but warriors with weapons had already closed in around him, and the stern man ordered that he be searched thoroughly. The two men angrily demanded that the boy raise his hands, but he doubted their trust, while one of the instigators wavered and admitted his mistake. After this, he casually released a small object from his palm, which disappeared with a pop, and soon the narrow alley was filled with thick smoke, causing surprise among those around. Meanwhile, one of them shouted that it was a smokescreen, and the other two started coughing and covering their faces, shocked by the sudden fog around them. At that very moment, a cry of pain pierced the tense silence. The unknown man had been pierced by a blow, and his groan echoed throughout the alley. Then the guy instantly pulled himself together, deciding to rely not on his sight, but on his hearing, and tightly squeezed the vial of blood in his hand. At this time, the owner of short silver hair and a stern look thought that the potion would greatly enhance his hearing. After this, the figure, with a smug smile, declared that it could clearly distinguish the steps, and with a sharp jerk, it rushed forward, striking. Finn responded by swiftly cutting the air with his sword, shouting a command, but his opponent confidently noticed that the blade missed. Then the young man furiously wondered why he couldn't hit the enemy, and regretted that he hadn't been able to pinpoint his location. After tense moments, the guy confidently declared checkmate, finding himself behind his opponent and holding the wounded man in a strong grip. He explained that the substance he had used earlier was not a smokescreen, but a means of disrupting the functioning of the vestibular apparatus, which caused confusion in his interlocutor. Meanwhile, Kai warned that using hearing stimulants was almost tantamount to suicide, while someone standing nearby silently watched what was happening. The wounded adversary demanded to know who he was, but the boy coolly replied that he was just a traveling apothecary, after which he reached out for his hat. The young man then adjusted it on his head and calmly remarked that he was indifferent to nicknames and titles, but he was worried about the possibility of them being distorted by outsiders. Soon the tense silhouette in the hat showed his true face, causing shock to the other, who could not come to terms with the truth. Afterwards, the headdressed figure towered over the two fallen men, warning them that taking the lives of future clients was a grave sin, while one of the vanquished begged for mercy. He nevertheless reassured her, saying that he had another healing remedy with him, but the girl anxiously remembered that her potion could turn out to be counterfeit. At this time, someone reported that a gang of counterfeit elixir dealers had been captured, and another added that the criminals had been abandoned in front of the Marine Corps base. Then one called out to the departing figure, and the strong man commented on the return of the lost reputation, and the woman with the bow confirmed that those tinctures were indeed false. Finally, the boy with his hands bandaged thanked his savior for his life, and people nearby noticed that he looked much better than before. Finn reacted with bewilderment to the demand to pay 300 large gold coins, exclaiming that such money was too expensive. Then the confident young man in the wide-brimmed hat said that the debt could be repaid later, when he realized his dream and became a first-class adventurer. After this, one of them, slightly raising his hat, walked away, and the second silently watched him. Then the first remembered the proof of the true apothecary, and this caused surprise in the observer. Soon the young adventurer confidently declared his decision to become a first-class hero and continued to walk through the city streets. However, the guy in the hat warned his companion to speak more quietly, noticing that his voice sounded too loud. Meanwhile, the mysterious figure in the cloak and wide-brimmed hat muttered thoughtfully about how rarely Shin decided to help others. She also asked him if he had begun to become attached to this world while he was resting among the soft pillows. Then he, with a slight smile, called her his dear reincarnator. At this time, a huge bird spread its wings over the dense northern forests of Bolivia, soaring against the backdrop of mountain peaks. Then a large tiger with bright stripes appeared in the thicket, creeping forward, while a rabbit stood guard nearby, and two owls flew silently above them, emitting long hoots. Early in the morning in the forest, a figure with binoculars carefully examined the area, noting that the target was still not seen, although the clock already showed 8. The armored man then explained that this was all part of Lewis's plan, but the red-haired adventurer angrily asked why they had to go so deep into the forest. At this point, the scout was ordered to remain on guard. The young man with the spiky hair then insisted that their personal desires were irrelevant and that they should only follow orders, to which the other one remarked that it was not just to avoid being noticed. Soon Lillian spotted the target through her binoculars and, hiding behind a tree, quietly informed the others that it was visible. However, her gaze fell on the mark left by the forest viper, and she realized that she had accidentally ended up in its territory, after which she decided to retreat immediately. The girl was horrified to see a giant snake sleeping, while the boy was carefree collecting plants nearby, explaining the monster's hunting method, which uses its massive body and poisonous fangs. Then he realized with surprise where he was sitting, and she, in a rage, demanded to know why he had settled down right on a forest viper. The girl quickly warned that it was impossible to disturb the sleeping creature, and the dark-haired young man who was nearby asked doubtfully who she was. She insistently added that even a B-class monster posed a mortal threat to the adventurer team, and urged them to leave quickly. In response, the young man in the hat calmly noted that he had used a sleeping potion on the creature, while the other one asked in bewilderment what a potion was. Then the interlocutor explained that they only wanted to collect herbs, specifying that many valuable plants grow near the lair of the forest viper, next to the white water lilies. The girl wondered if a light touch would awaken the sleeping snake, to which her interlocutor cautiously agreed that it was quite possible. Then the monster suddenly opened its eyes. The tension soon increased as the massive snake-like creature snapped its jaws, while a figure with short hair and a quiver on its back watched warily. Then the girl, holding the small creature in her hands, nervously doubted whether she had given it an extra dose, but the little animal nodded and assured her that it was conscious. The giant snake hissed furiously, and the archer, with a cry of horror, began to run, followed quickly by the man, escaping from the monster. Loud booms shook the forest, and then the girl in despair asked why this was happening, but her companion warned that it was better not to go there. After this, two fell off the cliff, and one explained the reason, pointing down, because there was an edge ahead, and they flew over a dense thicket. The woman narrowly dodged the attack of the two-headed dragon, grabbing onto a tree branch. She felt a sense of relief, realizing how close death had been as the branch creaked pitifully under her weight. Meanwhile, one was calmly admiring the views, while the other, in horror, noticed how the branch broke, and both fell down, screaming, into the river. Having climbed ashore, she indignantly complained that she was soaking wet, but he just waved her off, mockingly calling her a pervert and casually answering, "Oh well." After this, the guy introduced himself as Shin and asked if he was a traveling pharmacist, at which point a fish awkwardly slid out from under his hat. The girl explained that her party had broken up and she had gone into the forest alone but had gotten lost. She then asked the apothecary to sell her some potions, even if it meant paying a high price. She indignantly asked if this looked like a robbery in broad daylight, but he calmly explained that relying on cheap potions was dangerous, adding that he did not want complaints if someone died. Then she fell silent with a look of alarm on her face, and he coldly remarked that confusing courage with recklessness was only dreaming of a quick death. Later, the girl, wrapped in a towel, offered to exchange the necklace, and the guy sitting next to her was surprised while the third one was adding wood to the fire. He animatedly showed the pendant as a valuable item for the deal, and she hesitated, admitting that it belonged to her mother, but eventually agreed, supporting his arguments. Then the girl noticed the gathering darkness and decided to hurry back to the city, thinking that her mother would scold her if she was greedy with the potions and died. Suddenly, the man in the hat stood up abruptly and was about to leave. Despite her surprised cry, he explained that he had received an order to hunt an orc, and the sturdy hunter had asked him to bring meat from the northern forest. Shin was surprised to hear about the orc hunt, and his companion worriedly stated that it was too dangerous to go there without a weapon. Then he asked doubtfully why she hated orcs so much, but the girl firmly decided to accompany him, despite the threat. The confident man in the hat announced that he had a trump plan, and the woman with the bow doubted this idea with disbelief as he walked along the forest path. The girl sitting on the ground looked up in surprise when the young man next to her suddenly asked what her mother was like. She hesitated, admitted that she didn't know, and the guy in the hat remembered how he himself was once abandoned as a child and found with an earring in his ear. Then she smiled softly, saying that she carefully kept the earring as a memory of her mother, her face glowing with warmth and tenderness. At this time, Lillian gave a sign to remain silent, sneaking through the bushes, which made Eris shudder, and the guy with the rope chose to remain silent, watching what was happening. Soon a massive horned orc appeared nearby, whining, holding a bone in one paw and licking another, sitting among a pile of skulls. The girl noticed the huge orc with alarm and asked if everything would be alright, but her companion confidently declared that he looked fat and appetizing, and then rushed away, leaving her to call out to him. When the ogre approached, the girl threatened to stay away from him, but he only grinned with a sinister grin, and then she admitted that she was just joking. The next second, she rushed at the enemy with a battle cry and crashed into him with force, unleashing a sudden attack. She took advantage of the moment and darted to the side while the smoky horned creature coughed and choked on clouds of smoke, trying to recover. Meanwhile, another short-haired figure was climbing higher and higher up the trunk of a tall tree, wondering if it was safe to continue climbing. He told her to get to the marked tree and throw the potion at the orc, and she doubted whether this plan would even work. The girl tried with all her might to free her leg, which the monster had grabbed, mentally persuading herself to quickly get to the crown of the tree. Lillian, catching her breath on the branch, called out to Shin anxiously, but in response she heard only silence and did not know what to do next. Panic gripped her and she cried out whether he had really escaped, while nearby a two-headed monster was furiously tearing at a tree. The creature growled ferociously, and the two-headed enemy standing on a nearby branch grimly acknowledged that there was no longer any escape route, surrounded by dense foliage. She gripped the bow tighter in her hands, determined not to let the situation escalate and to be ready to fight alone. At that moment, Shin shouted for Eris to jump towards him while she was aiming, but she suddenly changed her mind and called out his name in alarm. The girl fell down from the branch, and the guy managed to catch her in mid-flight, praising her for her jump, while the huge creature clung to the tree in shock. He confidently explained that this step was also part of the calculation, but she, looking ahead, noticed with excitement that the monster was about to jump. He calmly replied that there was no need to worry. Then the youth fell from the tree with a mighty blow, and as the earth shook from the impact, he remarked with cold certainty that it was clearly not a good day for a fall, and the enemy recoiled in confusion. A huge collapse thundered in the deep pit, into which a figure collapsed with a cry of pain, while another stepped forward through the chaos. She noticed his suffering and mentioned it, to which he seriously explained that the reason was the use of a special potion. The man drank a drug that enhanced the senses like doping, but increased sensitivity to pain, making him unfit for combat. Then he proudly announced that the task had been completed perfectly, and she could not believe that the orc had been defeated so easily. He admitted that he was not a ranger and preferred to avoid dirty fights. He casually tossed the trophy to her, reminding her of the reward for helping her in the hunt, and the girl reacted to this with annoyance and surprise. She clutched the small pendant in her palm, then, walking into the depths of the forest, quietly thanked him. Soon the armored warrior ordered everyone to remain still, aiming his sword, and the archer drew his bowstring as three people approached them, struck by the tense atmosphere. The two stepped back cautiously while the others tried to figure out if they knew each other, and one of them assured that the meeting was no problem, despite the surprise. The stern man asked which of them was Ishin, and then explained that he was looking for a certain Shin. The two nearby looked at each other in bewilderment. The young man sharply demanded to know the stranger's identity, but he sarcastically replied that he was not obliged to explain anything. The stern man calmly accepted the refusal, while the other demonstratively stuck out his tongue, showing a defiant grimace. At that moment, the knight jumped down from above with naked blades, and two were walking below, and he issued a challenge, checking whether the opponent's body could withstand it. Then one of the participants remembered an important detail, and the group moved along a forest path, where a confident girl extended her hand to her determined companion. The dark-haired man told the knight about a ship from the Empire that had arrived in the harbor a few days ago, which made him surprised. In a close-up, the man passionately declared that it was definitely Shin standing in front of him. The archer threatened to kill in a rage, while the other watched with caution, realizing the danger of his opponents and feeling the sweat come out. They set up an ambush in a forest clearing, and one shouted about the army of the Empire, while the others prepared for attack or defense. The young man, slightly sweating, noticed that the situation was becoming more and more interesting, and there was excitement in his voice. A cheerful boy greeted the man at the brazier who asked about his wounds. He replied that he was inquiring, and then ran down the street lit by lanterns. The boy wondered if Shinsan was absent today, and the elder explained that he was currently hunting orcs alone in the northern forest. Under the crescent moon, a tense conversation ensued about the identities of the approaching figures. Then one hurled a stone, and the archer watched intently, concluding that they must be Imperial warriors. The man deftly dodged the arrows that pierced the target, after which the dark-haired youth launched a fire strike, loudly shouting for everyone to attack. Suddenly, a thick curtain of smoke enveloped the battlefield, causing surprise among those present. One of them cracked his knuckles, preparing to meet the enemy. The dark-haired warrior swung his weapon furiously, declaring that such a ploy would not work, while the other crouched in a defensive stance, preparing for his next move. Then Reiner knocked down the enemy with a powerful kick and screamed, and Lillian desperately called out to Shin, while Eris acknowledged his courage. The man, with a sinister smile, warned the girl not to move, promising to deal with her later, and she watched his every move warily. She abruptly declared that she should not be underestimated just because she was a girl, and suddenly jumped forward, causing surprise to the person standing next to her. Lillian narrowly dodged the arrow, wincing at how close it was, and Finn, stunned, lost his balance as another projectile flew past. The silver-haired one decided to hit his opponent's hand first, while the other one called out to Shin, who jumped and threw the object. The dark-haired man parried a sword blow from the fair-haired warrior hovering above him and noticed an orc's fang nearby, which caused him no small amount of surprise. He felt grateful to Eris for having both his arms, and the small figure behind him happily asked if it was possible to buy such things, as they were expensive. The first participant asked if his vision was blurred by an unknown poison, after which the second reacted with shock when the liquid splashed out, and the third spat sharply. One of the fighters offered another a lesson, explaining that the most important thing in hunting is the coordination of the entire team. The young man narrowly escaped being swallowed by the giant snake, but the next second the monster swallowed him anyway, and two armored warriors watched warily. She screamed in horror, recognizing the forest weaver, and he looked in amazement at the huge snake. Then he shouted to Eris to run immediately, and they rushed through the thicket, but suddenly a dragon appeared. The knight grabbed his sword, and the woman shouted to stop. The monster glared sharply and struck with its tail, which the red-haired man barely dodged, exclaiming in irritation, after which the beast bit hard with its teeth nearby. Finn gave the order to retreat, and the order was immediately accepted, while the huge serpent hissed menacingly among the fallen trees. When they had escaped danger, the man wiped his face, and the woman, catching her breath, asked why the forest weaver had appeared now. She was told that it was because of the potion he had thrown. The girl asked if this was true, and then the young man explained that he had added the monster's favorite fruit to the infusion to lure it, but noted that he should also have used deodorant. He suggested that it would be easier for them to deal with 3 opponents than to engage in direct confrontation, to which the girl responded with disbelief, not understanding his logic. He then suggested that the enemies might be from the Imperial army, and she asked who they really were. He explained that the lie was meant as a distraction, and recalled their conversation about the ship. He then explained that the current conflict was caused by events that happened 6 years ago, and she asked whether there was currently a truce between the Kingdom of Atwald and the Empire. 6 years ago, Imperial forces attacked a vital port city, and after a fierce war, it was destroyed. Ultimately, both sides were forced to conclude a truce, while maintaining their mutual hatred. After that, he wondered what the Empire was doing now and decided that it was worth looking into it, noticing Eris nearby, standing in a quiet, grassy clearing. The girl happily chewed the meat on the skewer, noting with a satisfied smile that it was incredibly tasty. At the counter, she cheerfully asked the cook for 2 more servings, while the boy watched silently, and the cook himself praised her appetite. Then she explained that she hadn't eaten since the previous evening, and the young man teased her with a grin, saying that she was simply too hungry. Soon, the irritated guy expressed his displeasure, while the woman responded theatrically to the compliment, and another accused him of being a womanizer after their meeting in the forest. The young man approached the shopkeeper with a question about the Empire's recent activity, asking why their people were wandering through the northern forest during the existing truce. He asked the girl if she was a ranger and why she went into the northern forest, to which she quietly replied that she was from Atwald. She sincerely admitted that she was hunting in the northern forest, and then showed him a piece of paper, which made him raise his eyebrows in surprise. The advertisement stated that hunters were promised a reward of 100 gold coins for the hide of a giant boar over 3 meters long, provided that it was undamaged. 2 men reacted excitedly to the ad, one exclaiming that it was extremely tempting, while the other looked amazed. The young man frowned, and the girl enthusiastically explained that the quest also required resource gathering, and that you could get an additional 150 coins for saving the skins. The group began to discuss what they would dream of if they became rich, but one boy dismissed the idea, saying that fighting a giant boar was an unnecessary hassle, and that its meat was disgusting. The tattooed man confirmed the beast's character, and the young man explained that even boiling wouldn't make the meat any tenderer, to which the woman remarked in surprise that someone had clearly tried it before. One of the men asked Shin about the orc meat he had ordered, and he nervously offered a tusk instead, but the other man abruptly refused such a substitution. He checked his empty wallet, admitting to himself with annoyance that he was left penniless, while at that moment 2 people were sitting under an umbrella on a quiet street. The man then demanded payment for the orc meat, while the other, nervously wiping away sweat, lamented that all their efforts had been in vain. He suddenly falls forward, startled by the crackling of a dry leaf, and immediately 2 men in armor appear before him, admitting that they had been patiently awaiting his arrival. 2 men stand over a bound man seated on a chair. One of them asks if the prisoner is awake, but he only groans softly and twitches in his ropes. The young man in chains angrily demands to know how they were found, but the confident interlocutor calmly says that they had an informant and now they know all his details, including his place of residence. A determined warrior demands a potion recipe from a captive, sitting with him in a modest village room where the air is filled with tension. He acknowledges the rumors about the potion's power and states that with them, the Imperial army will become stronger than ever before. Meanwhile, the dark-haired guy, although tied up, grins cheekily, hinting that he can either obey or go against their expectations. Then one person gets hit with a blade and screams in pain, while the other furiously demands that the torture not be prolonged. The man again insists on the recipe, assuring them that they won't even have to brew the potion themselves if he gives them the formula. The red-haired adventurer laughs madly, and the black-haired knight screams as his sword shatters against the barrier with a deafening ringing sound. The silver-haired woman offers an alliance, promising that the Empire will treat the prisoner as a guest and provide honor, but another captive nearby struggles to catch his breath. One of the guards raises a heavy sword to the prisoner's face and sternly warns that he can either give up the power of the empire or rot along with the damned kingdom. A man with spiky hair spits in his interlocutor's face, roughly grabbing him by the chin, causing him to flinch in surprise. Dark-haired, bespectacled youth, covered in sweat and anger, sarcastically says that they will still return empty-handed, like worthless people. The prisoner kicks furiously, tugging at the ropes, and defiantly offers to help his enemy commit suicide, drawing a furious look in response. Then the tied-up guy deftly dodges the blow, throws off his bonds with a smile and throws the bottle, causing the knight to cry out in anger, having been hit by the bottle. Despite being seriously wounded, the young man, overcoming the pain, climbs the ladder and forces the attacker to swallow his experimental poison. He resolutely refuses to flee, even with a wounded leg, clutching a broken branch in his hands and loudly declaring that he intends to fight to the end. Reiner strikes with his sword, mocking the apothecary, but he confidently replies that the healer has his own methods of fighting. The enemy threatens to cut off all his limbs in order to completely deprive him of resistance. Meanwhile, the dark-haired boy counterattacks and explains that his strengthening potion makes any object as hard as diamond, which leaves the knight stunned. A powerful force crashes down, crushing the ground beneath the armored man and sending debris flying in all directions, creating a chaotic scene of destruction. He explains that the object will crumble in a moment, watching with alarm as the shards begin to disintegrate right in his palm. Two young men are relaxing on a rooftop among spring flowers. One is remarking on what a wonderful day it is, while the other is sprawled out carefree nearby. A bald man lights a cigarette with a lighter, after which the scene shifts to a quiet village street with wooden houses and a spreading tree in the background. The man tied to the tree confirms the involvement of the Imperial army, and the woman, hearing this, claps her hands. The bound man is asked what he intends to do next, while the other, crouching nearby, insists on biding his time and obtaining information before the kingdom intervenes. A tense conversation ensues. One asks whether the Empire is planning to violate the armistice agreement, and the other responds with a cryptic phrase. The young man anxiously asks the old man if he understands these words, and he explains that it is the old language of the Empire, recalling his trading experience there. A scarred man interrogates a young merchant, suspecting that he is more than just a pharmacist or a kebab stand owner, to which the boy responds with a confident smile. A bearded man blows smoke while another clarifies the message, and then a close-up shows a determined face, insisting that missions are carried out only in the name of a great will, everything else is powerless. The young man confidently proposes a test with the shimmering flask, declaring that if the old man does not speak, his body will respond on its own. The old man responds with hesitation. A man with a dark look swears that someone will pay for the orc meat, causing the person standing nearby to shudder in fear. The two walk through the forest, discussing how the old man deals with enemies, when the girl calls out to a boy named Shin, whom Eris meets. She admires his strength, but he dismisses it as just a scratch from when they were caught alone. A girl calls out to a guy in the thicket and suggests joining a party. He refuses, claiming that he is not interested in alliances and is ready to give all the awards to her, but she assures him that she will not lose out on such an agreement. He then asks why she is so determined to hunt the giant boar, and she quietly admits that she is seeking revenge for the family destroyed by the beast. The young man, with a determined look, turns to Shin for help, expressing hope and impatience. An adventurer confidently accepts a challenge to exterminate a monstrous boar and asks the guild scribe to formalize the task, causing a stir among the witnesses. Lillian interrogates Shin about his reluctance to appear at the guild and wonders out loud what is going on inside the mysterious building nearby. A group of stern-looking men discuss the benefits of the guild and the restricted access to its services, while a small figure at the side quietly inquires who they are. The young man in the hat awkwardly explains that revealing all the information will give away his trump cards. His interlocutor considers him strange, but thanks him for his answer. The girl explains that the object is a magical means of communication, apologizing for her lack of preparation, while the guy listens intently and the other watches silently. A young man in a hat asks for help in hunting a giant boar, adding that he does not mind handing over the entire reward to others while two people are talking nearby. The man anxiously asks where the rest of the squad members are, but, looking around, he hears from the woman and the young man in the hat that there is no one else except the two of them. The guy warns that the giant boar is a dangerous Class C monster that destroyed villages, but the girl calmly replies that they are leaving, not paying attention to his words. The young man quietly calls out to Yumiya, while others nearby discuss the rangers who agreed to the risky mission, and she quietly admits to a deep dislike for them. She approaches a quiet forest spring, noticing that it matches the description of eyewitnesses. A frog is croaking nearby and birds' wings are flapping. He looks with enthusiasm at the rare herbs in the lair of the giant boar, and she, surprised, wonders why he is not nervous at all. The girl shows the boar's track, estimating that it was left several days ago, and the guy suggests setting the trap deeper in the thicket, and not in this place. They discuss the design of a trap on a proven trail to lure the animal out of the forest, while arguing about how to lure it without damaging the skin. He suggests using 2 of them as bait. She reacts to the idea sharply, but then runs into a solid obstacle and hits herself. At that moment a loud roar is heard nearby. A boy lies on the ground, with a giant boar towering over him. A girl nearby screams in fear, but he quickly asks her to remain silent, assuring her that he has a plan. The frightened young man trembles, clutching a wooden club, but despite his fear, he decides not to give up, while the enraged boar roars and rushes at him. The girl, in horror, claims that it is hopeless when a huge beast attacks her and throws her forcefully into the air. They both manage to jump back, and at the same second a massive explosion destroys the wall behind them, scattering stones and debris in all directions. He stretches and comments that even a truck is unstable in a strong crosswind, while 2 children nearby are urged to take cover quickly. A boy notices that his shoelaces are untied just as a wild boar is rushing straight at him. Someone nearby warns him of the impending danger. The young man calmly orders the fallen beast to rise after falling, demonstrating a complete lack of fear. He confirms that the trap worked and the girl agrees that it was a pit trap. Then he tightly wraps the captured animal with a rope, completing the capture. The guy explains that wild boars jump over tree roots because their hooves are slippery, so they decide to place a log on the path and dig a trap right in front of it. He claps his hands confidently, declaring that the task was easy, while the other reminds about the importance of setting the trap carefully, and the girl clarifies about the boar nearby. One of the boys excitedly says that the giant boar that destroyed their village was even bigger, and the scene shifts to a vast, destroyed forest area. The young man proudly admits that it was he who set the trap, and a girl named Maru introduces herself and her village, standing next to a tall woman who gently places her hand on his head. The boy hurriedly asks Eris to do something, while the other insists that she come to the village, where everyone is already waiting for her. The young man recalls that a huge boar destroyed everything when he was a baby, and the man in the hat confirms that now everyone lives at the foot of the mountain. The man asks Eris if she remembers that place, and she quietly reflects that there used to be a river there, where he often lost his shoes and got scolded by his sister, and flowers bloomed at the entrance to the village thanks to the river water. When asked if she had been there before, the girl answered softly that it was a long time ago, her face taking on a thoughtful and warm expression. The young man quietly admits that this is his hometown, standing next to the girl, and together they look at the lifeless ruins around. The girl sternly scolds the boy for going into the forest alone, and he, shifting from foot to foot, apologizes guiltily. Someone exclaims with despair in their voice that the reward for killing the giant boar will allow them to return and live here again, but a woman nearby comments on the situation with irritation. A girl with short dark hair nervously recognizes Eris and asks why she is here, and a breathless boy explains that they just defeated a giant boar. She angrily orders the traitor to get away, but then notices that Maru is losing consciousness and calls out to him, while the other girl urges Yumi to move faster. The young man is breathing heavily and sweating profusely, and someone notices that he has a high fever, warning him that things are very bad. The doctor gloomily admits that the medicine is powerless, while the woman anxiously cares for the coughing boy in bed, and outside the window it rains quietly. The village doctors admit that they do not know the cause of the illness and doubt that even the capital's doctors will be able to cure him, but then the young man politely interrupts them, asking to let them through. The girl realizes that it is he, and he confirms that the bruise on his side indicates contact with the poisonous plant Harem. He explains that this poisonous flower grows deep underground and was most likely touched while digging the trap, then offers to give an antidote, which causes surprise among those present. The young man, visibly embarrassed, says that he is just a pharmacist who just happened to be passing by, and the elderly man in glasses cautiously asks who he is. The boy sleeps peacefully with a fading fever, the woman notes his improvement with relief, and the man next to him looks at what is happening with surprise. The girl thanks the young man for saving her, and he modestly says his name is Shin, adjusting his hat on his head. She then expresses her gratitude again and asks if he is Eris's boyfriend, but he firmly denies it, after which the woman notes that Shin and Eris already know each other. The girl remembers that she grew up with Eris in the same orphanage, and now she is taken on the care of children like Maru, who have lost their parents. She quietly confesses that this is her way of atoning for her sins, while the good-natured young man listens attentively. After this, the story moves to a rainy, ruined village, which the determined woman leaves behind in pursuit of her dream. A child clutches a drawing of a house and family, crying bitterly on the ground, while a man with an umbrella offers to lend it for a fee, which a woman nearby doubtfully questions. After this, she confirms that the traps have already been set, and all that remains is to wait for the prey, while nearby workers are struggling to construct a large cart to transport the giant boar. The girl confidently declares that they will definitely cope with him, while the two men doubt the strength of the inexperienced tracker and discuss whether they will be able to kill the beast quickly. Meanwhile, he carefully studies the mysterious object, and the girl sitting next to him eats and notes his concentration with slight surprise. He explains that the mark is a blessing from a deity, while she expresses doubt, believing that it does not look like magic at all, and admits that believing in such signs is unexpected for her. Around the campfire, the boy explains that he is the older sister and Yumiya is the younger sister, who was their mother, while the girl sadly reflects on their eternal bond and how everything was destroyed because of her. Then the arrow pierces the large fish-like creature, and the girl excitedly lifts up her catch, announcing that dinner will be stewed rabbit, while the other calls for her to wait. The girl cries, worried that she has lost her shoe and her sister will scold her for being clumsy, but the other one calms her down, promising to share hers. The priestess sternly warns her younger sister about the dangers of the forest while an older man tries to calm her down, and soon she calls loudly to two people outside the building. Two children are crying and asking for forgiveness, and an elderly woman gently advises them to take a bath and then eat stewed rabbit together, which brings noticeable relief to the children. One girl excitedly tells her sister that she will become an adventurer in the future, and their mother watches them with a kind smile. After this, the girl promises to earn a lot of money for the daily feasts, while the woman in sacred robes smiles warmly, looking at the sleeping child. Meanwhile, they unwittingly stray into rabbit territory while hunting in the woods, but the scene soon shifts to the two girls sleeping peacefully in the house. Waking up, one wakes her sister, who notices the monster glaring through the window, lets out a scream and demands to stop before the monster explodes with a roar. The figure barely manages to dodge the falling debris as the alarming warning of mortal danger grows louder. She kneels down and asks Eris to take Yumiya and run away, and the girl clings to her, admitting that she is scared, but happy that they are safe. The tearful girl desperately insists that she wants to stay with her sister, and she gently asks Eris to protect Yuma, and a touching moment of tenderness is born between them. Two children run screaming towards a familiar figure, but suddenly a huge boar appears next to the woman in the priestess's robes. Later, the children stand silently by the graves, realizing their loss. The young man sits by the fire in silence, blaming his own weakness for what happened, while the girl next to him silently listens to his confession. She then firmly vows to defeat the giant boar and bring peace back to her family and village, clutching the sword tightly as energy crackles around it. At this time, the young man in the decorated uniform is thoughtfully reflecting on his family, and another remarks that he has never heard such stories from him, and under the moonlight a balanced answer sounds. The girl asks if Tia has a cold, she sneezes and assumes that someone is talking about her, while the guy is relaxing carefree on the couch. After this, one of them asks about Shin's condition, and the other explains that he is becoming increasingly interested in hunting the giant boar as soon as possible. She condemns the boar as a destructive and impudent wild creature, but he asks with a grin who would ever consider such a hobby bad. Then she continues to stand in alarm, and the girl lying on the sofa blames the wild creatures for the current troubles. Meanwhile, the priestess calmly reflects on the sad fate of the giant beast and expresses quiet sympathy while the fire crackles nearby. The young man apologizes with sincere regret for getting everyone into trouble, and the other decides to check the traps before dawn, while the girl sits silently by the fire. Then he asks why all this is happening, but she gently hints that it is not too late to abandon the dangerous idea, emphasizing that he does not need to sacrifice himself at all. However, the determined guy declares that victory will be his, and the girl asks in surprise whose life will be at stake. He explains that he is talking about Shin. She is shocked by his words, and the young man steps aside, admitting that the blame for not knowing the true nature of the boar lies entirely with him. Then he consoles her, claiming that weakness is not a sin, and the girl quietly agrees, looking up with a soft smile. At this moment, a huge creature approaches the camp, its heavy steps sound threatening, the beast growls furiously, and two run towards the fire, and one of them, wearing a hat, greets the arrival of his comrade with a confident smile.